In the 42nd millennium, as the stars began to dim and entire systems flickered like dying embers in a celestial hearth, a silence settled across the broken arms of the galaxy. Not peace, never peace, but a suffocating stillness, as if the heavens themselves were holding breath before the final collapse. The Astronomicon, that great beacon of mankind's unity, pulsed weakly through the Imperium, its radiance choked by storms both physical and psychic. Once it had roared, a sun forged in will and sacrifice. Now it bled, dim and mournful. Above the corpse world of Kemrath, where oceans had long since boiled away and cities hung in orbit like rotting fruit, the Idolicum Invictus drifted without course. The flagship of the Third Legion, its armor flaked and its engines long silent, mirrored its master in every way, glorious once, peerless even, but now fractured by time and ruin. Within its cathedrals of rust and memory, he sat, Luceran, once called the Prince of Harmony, now only a shadow seated upon a throne of gold turned to ash. He was not born Luceran. That name had been given to him by the Emperor himself, carved into his being during the gene forging of the Primarchs, a name that echoed beauty and purpose. But names were like flesh, corruptible, fragile, mortal. Luceran had learned this in the centuries after the heresy, as his sons fell not to chaos, but to silence. Not one of them lived now, save the things that still wore their faces in the warp. Luceran had fled the eye not out of cowardice, but out of clarity. In the madness of eternal war, he had glimpsed something worse than chaos. He had seen himself. He rose from the throne slowly, his armor groaning like a dying beast. Its once opalescent sheen was dulled, its shoulder crest fractured. Time had no power over the gene-forged flesh of a Primarch, but guilt did. Guilt weighed heavier than gravity. He moved through the grand nave of the Invictus, beneath statues of sons he had long since stopped naming. The ship moaned with ghost voices. His memories, or the remnants of those slaughtered in the siege of terror, he could no longer say. A flicker of power danced at the edge of his perception. A message, old and corrupted, crackled through the Vox systems. The voice of Malchior, first captain, loyal unto the end, or so Luceran had believed. My lord, the pact is broken. They come for you now. The gods remember betrayal. Luceran's hands tightened. Malchior had been dead for millennia. Luceran had buried him himself, beneath the scorched plains of Irith. That voice should not exist, and yet, here it was. The message repeated, warped by static, warped by time. He knew then. Something stirred, a reckoning. And so began the long walk to the observation chamber, where Kemrath's shattered moon hung like a lacerated eye in the void. He needed to see it, to feel what he had lost and what still remained. His thoughts drifted, as they often did, to the moment it all turned. Not Istvan, not the heresy, no, before that, before chaos whispered, before the lie of perfection unraveled. It was a simple moment, a single word. No. Spoken by a child. Her name was Seraphine, a remembrancer. She had been assigned to the Third during the Great Crusade, a painter and philosopher with eyes like glass. She had seen through him, not the demigod, not the perfected form, but the soul. And when he had offered her immortality, gene splicing, rejuvenation, the honor of becoming his chronicler for eternity, she had said no. It had burned him more than any blade. He, Luceran, the most beautiful of the Emperor's sons, the most adored, the most perfect, rejected by a mortal. He had not punished her. That would have been beneath him, or so he had told himself. Instead, he had let her go. let her fade with age and time. But in truth, that was the first betrayal. Not by her, by him. He had betrayed the very purpose of his creation, the upliftment of humanity for pride. And in that seed of hurt, chaos had found fertile soil. The whispers had not needed to deceive him. They had only needed to offer affirmation. You were right. She was wrong. You are eternal. They are dust. Now the dust claimed the stars. In the observation chamber, he stood beneath Kemrath's dying sky. Below, the surface cracked like dry parchment. A supervolcano ruptured across the equator, splitting tectonics with indifferent rage. The planet would not last long, just as the Imperium would not. There was beauty in it, he thought, the final symphony of a world destroyed by its own striving. The Emperor's dream had always been to bring man to the stars, but never once did he consider what man would become once there. A soft chime echoed. The long-range augers pulsed faintly. Contact. The name on the screen sent a slow, cold breath down his spine. Solaris Reborn. He knew that name. Captain Astrel, one of his sons, one of the last uncorrupted. Astrel had vanished 3,000 years ago in the war against the Ghoul Stars, taking with him a splinter of the Third Legion's remnant. They had sworn to redeem the name of the Emperor's children, renouncing chaos, renouncing even Luceran. He had never expected them to return. Luceran stared at the name. Was it Astrel? Or another lie? Another trick of the gods? He felt the stirring of something he had not known in centuries, hope, and with it, dread. Because if Astrel had returned, then a choice would come, a reckoning, redemption or annihilation. There could be no middle ground, not anymore. A whisper, not from the Vox, but from within, caressed his thoughts. You have wandered long, Prince of Silence, but your symphony is not yet done. Lucaran turned his head slowly. Shadows moved where light should have been. No voice had spoken aloud, and yet it reverberated inside him like a forgotten melody. The warp bled into reality here. He had known it would eventually. The gods were patient. They always waited until you thought you were free. He felt the chain of eternity tightening. There would be no hiding now. He looked again at the auger. The Solaris Reborn was drawing nearer. In its wake, a fleet, war frigates, cruisers, and a black monolith at its heart that bore no heraldry he recognized. Not Imperial, not traitor. Something else. Perhaps Astrel had found allies, or perhaps they were his executioners. Luceran turned from the dying world and made his way toward the war sanctum. The weapons had long been dormant, but not useless. He passed beneath the banners of old victories, Ulanor, Talaris, Kethon Prime, and then Istvan. He stopped there for a moment. The tapestry was torn. A burning sun, falling through a field of broken spears, a stylized depiction of his own fall. He touched the fabric. It was brittle, like memory, and he wept, not for the Emperor, not for himself, but for what might have been. The Idolicum Invictus drifted through the void like a wounded animal. It had not been the same since the heresy, not since the moment Lucaran had abandoned his sons, not out of betrayal, but because he could not bear to lead them into another war that he knew would never be won. The echoes of that decision had haunted him in every dark corner of the ship, and now, as he paced the cold halls, a deep emptiness stretched across his heart. As he passed beneath the twisted banners of long-dead warriors and fallen heroes, his footsteps rang in the silence, punctuating the cold air like the toll of a distant bell. But Luceran was not alone. From the shadows, an old voice rumbled, a familiar, guttural sound that seemed to be pulled from the depths of a long-forgotten dream. My lord. Lucerne did not need to look to know who it was. The voice of Valeric, the master of arms, the broken, the betrayed, was unmistakable. Valeric had been with him through it all, loyal beyond measure. In the old days, before the fall, he had been one of Luceren's closest confidants, a hulking figure of strength who had once worn the pristine golden armor of the Emperor's children with pride. Now his armor was nothing more than jagged steel, the once perfect edges corrupted by time and neglect, just as the man had been. Luceren's gaze lingered on the floor for a moment, as if steeling himself for what came next. Valeric, he said softly, you still live. I thought I had lost you with the others. Valeric's figure emerged from the shadows, and Luceren saw the deep lines of age and sorrow etched into his face. The once pristine golden helmet was gone, replaced by a weathered iron mask. There was a time when Luceren had admired Valeric's strength, his unyielding loyalty. But now, as the years passed, it seemed like that strength had become something more brittle, something that could no longer hold the weight of everything they had lost. We are the last, my lord, Valeric rumbled. His voice was low, thick with regret. The last of what was, the last of the Emperor's children. Luceren nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the floor. I know, and yet we remain, adrift. Not all of us, Valeric said, his tone darkening. The Solaris Reborn draws near, as you know. Their fleet, my lord. It is not as it seems. There is something more at work here than Astral's return. This is no simple reunion of old bonds. Luceren's eyes flicked up, narrowing. What do you mean? Something stirs within the warp, Valeric continued. Something old, something that remembers us, remembers you. They call it the Song of the Fallen, but I know not who sings it. His voice faltered, as if the very words he spoke chilled him. The gods do not move in the ways we once knew. They have forgotten us, or they have chosen to remember us in ways we do not want to imagine. Luceren's chest tightened. The Song of the Fallen, a phrase he had heard whispered among the remains of his loyalists back in the early days after the heresy. It was said to be a summons, a call to those who had once been touched by the divine, but Luceren could never bring himself to believe it, until now. You think this is a test then? Luceren asked, the words slipping from his tongue like poisoned honey. A trial, a fate we must endure? Valeric nodded grimly. I think it is something far worse, a judgment. For a long moment, Luceren said nothing. His mind reeled with the thought of Estrel and his return. He had been so certain that those who had broken away from him, those who had abandoned him after the fall, had done so out of their own weakness. They had failed. They had rejected what was noble in the name of survival. But if Valeric was right, if this was not just a reunion but a reckoning, then all that had come before might not matter. If this was not just about vengeance, but about something more ancient, more inescapable, then the weight of the past would be brought to bear on all their shoulders. I need to speak to Astral, Luceren said, the words heavy in his mouth. We need to understand what has returned. Valeric was silent for a moment, then stepped forward, his hand reaching for Luceren's shoulder. My lord, he said softly, are you certain? I can still rally the Legion. We have enough strength left to... Luceren shook his head, brushing the touch away. No. We are ghosts, Valeric, shadows of what we once were. If this is to end, it will end in truth, and only Astral can tell me what that truth is. Valeric stood there, his massive form unwavering. But Luceren could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to protest, to rally, to fight, to hold on to what was left. But there was no force left in the universe that could hold back the inevitable. They both knew it. "Prepare the ship for departure," Luceren said, his voice unwavering now. "We leave for the Solaris Reborn as soon as possible. I want everything ready. This is not just a negotiation. It is a confrontation." Valaric bowed his head in understanding. "At once, my lord." Luceren turned, his mind heavy with the weight of the past always dragging him down. He had thought that time had dulled the sting of his decisions, but time had only sharpened the blade, its edge growing colder, more precise, more unforgiving. The question was no longer whether he could redeem his legion, whether he could reclaim his honor. The question was whether it was already too late to matter. As the Idolicum Invictus slipped through the warp, Luceren's mind was full of images, memories of a time before the fall, of his brothers, his sons, united in purpose under the Emperor's gaze. He remembered their laughter, their shared victories, the promise that they would bring humanity to its true greatness. Now, that greatness felt like a dream, and with the Solaris Reborn drawing ever closer, Luceren knew that one truth remained. His future, and the future of the Emperor's children, was inextricably tied to the choices he would make in the coming days. Choices that might finally break him. The Solaris Reborn appeared like a glittering phantom through the void. It was a ship, yes, once a ship, but now it was more than that. More than just metal and engine. It was a symbol, a living testament to a time long past, to a memory that refused to die. The gilded edges of its massive hull were dulled with age, but the sigils still marked it with the same radiance they had once held. The symbol of the Emperor's children. Luceren stood at the observation window of the Idolicum Invictus, his gaze fixed on the ship that loomed ever closer. He could almost feel the weight of it pressing against his chest, as though the Solaris Reborn was not merely a ship, but a monument to their fallen empire. It was a memory in motion, a harbinger of both what had been lost and what might still be salvaged. "Do you still believe in this, my lord?" Valaric's voice was gruff, the words cutting through the silence between them. He was standing just behind Luceren, as always, watching, waiting, ready for any command. But there was an edge in his tone now, something sharp and brittle. It was as if Valaric, too, had been affected by the ghostly presence of the Solaris Reborn. Luceren did not immediately answer. His mind swirled, the weight of the question sinking into his bones. Did he still believe in this? In Astral? In the idea that the Emperor's children could ever rise again from the ashes of their betrayal? The air around them hummed with tension, the ship's engines pulsing with quiet authority. He felt the tug of his past, the ambition, the pride, the loyalty, competing against the crushing weight of his doubts. Every day, every hour since the heresy had felt like a struggle between the man he had been and the man he had become. And now, facing Astral, Luceren could not help but wonder if the path ahead would lead to redemption or to the final, irreversible decay of all he had once held dear. "Belief is a luxury we can no longer afford," Luceren said at last, his voice low and distant. "I once believed in a future for us. A future where we were more than warriors, more than killers. But that future was stolen from us. Astral. He still holds on to that belief, but I am not sure it's enough." Valaric stepped closer, his eyes hardening. "Then why go, my lord?" Why put yourself in his hands again? What does Astral offer you that you cannot find elsewhere? Luceran's gaze never left the Solaris Reborn. It was almost as if he could feel Astral's presence through the hull, as if the very ship itself was calling to him. Astral was once my brother, Luceran murmured. He was one of the few who truly understood me. He believes in the Emperor's children, believes in what we could have been. But somewhere, in the depths of his soul, he carries the same wound we all bear. We are broken, Valeric, and I'm afraid we have nothing left to give. For a long moment, there was nothing but the hum of the ship, the low groan of the Idalicum Invictus as it cut through the warp. The stars outside the window flickered with the ghostly light of distant worlds, their beauty muted like the last remnants of an ancient dream. Then, just as the silence threatened to consume them, a voice crackled through the comms, startling both men. Luceran. It was not a question, but a statement, a command. The voice was familiar, sharp, and unmistakable. Astral Luceran straightened, the air around him thick with anticipation. He could feel the tension in Valeric's posture, the way the Master of Arms instinctively clenched his fists. Luceran, we are waiting. The words carried across the comms with a cold finality, as if Astral had been expecting this moment for far longer than Luceran was prepared to acknowledge. Luceran turned to face Valeric, his expression unreadable. I must face him. Valeric's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Luceran thought he might protest. But then, after a long breath, Valeric gave a curt nod. Do not be deceived, my lord. The Solaris Reborn is no longer the ship it once was. It is a mausoleum, not a sanctuary. Astral. He is not the man you remember. Luceran's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Valeric's words hung in the air like a warning, but Luceran knew, he knew, deep in his soul, that this confrontation was inevitable. There was no turning back. He turned on his heel and strode from the observation deck, heading toward the inner sanctum of the Idalicum Invictus. His steps echoed through the hollow halls, a solitary rhythm marking his path. As he entered the chamber, the cold glow of the ship's control panels illuminated the darkened space. In the center, the massive holomap of the Solaris Reborn flickered to life. It was here, in this quiet place, that Luceran had once made decisions that had altered the course of history. Here, he had watched as entire worlds fell to the tide of war. Now, as he stood before the flickering lights, those same decisions felt far more fragile, as though the weight of them might shatter if he touched them too strongly. The holomap flickered and shifted, a three-dimensional representation of the Solaris Reborn materializing in front of him. Its jagged hull seemed to loom larger in the room, as though it had become more than just a ship. It was an entity in its own right, an indomitable force that pulled him closer. Prepare the transport, Luceran ordered, his voice cold and resolute. We depart for the Solaris Reborn immediately. We are going to meet Astral. Valeric stepped into the room behind him, his face unreadable. I will accompany you, my lord. Luceran looked at him briefly, his gaze heavy. You may remain here. This is a matter between me and Astral. If we are to stand any chance of healing what has been broken, it must start with us. Valeric stiffened at the dismissal, but said nothing. There was something unspoken between them now, a realization that their time was running out. As Luceran left the room, he could not shake the feeling that the ship had become a prison, the walls closing in on him. The once great Emperor's children, reduced to this, their last hope tied to a man who might not even remember what they had once been. The weight of his father's expectations, the weight of his own ambition, and the weight of the galaxy's unrelenting hatred pressed down on him. And as he boarded the transport shuttle that would carry him to the Solaris Reborn, Luciran could feel the eyes of every fallen brother watching him from the shadows, judging him. It was time to face Estrel. The Solaris Reborn was not dead. That was the first thing Luciran noticed as his transport shuttle pierced its outer hangar field. The ship breathed, not with life but with memory. Its walls thrummed with echoes of past glories, like a cathedral that refused to be forgotten. The once pristine interiors were marred by centuries of corrosion, but the bones of beauty remained. Gilded columns, frescoes faded by time, and reliefs etched with scenes of perfection lost. It was a tomb, yes, but it was also a shrine. Luciran stepped onto the hangar deck with a slow, deliberate gait. His armor, darkened over the millennia, bore the scratches of campaigns forgotten by time. His crimson cloak trailed behind him like blood spilled across a marble floor. Waiting for him was Estrel. He stood alone, as if daring to embody the past in its entirety. He had not changed, at least not in the ways Luciran had expected. His armor still gleamed with the ceremonial precision of a bygone age. Regal violet trimmed with gold, the Palatine Aquila still etched across his chest, defiant against all that had come to pass. But his eyes. Luciran saw it instantly. Behind Estrel's poise, behind his perfect posture, the fire was dimmed, not extinguished, but cold, coiled. The light of conviction had narrowed into something more controlled, more dangerous. Estrel, Luciran said, voice carrying across the silent hangar like a bell tolling at dusk. Luciran, Estrel returned, with a voice as smooth and cutting as drawn glass. You've come. They approached one another like warriors in a duel, but no weapons were drawn. Not yet. Not here. It has been centuries, Luciran said, and yet you summoned me as if it were yesterday. You speak with the same certainty you always did. I summoned you, Estrel replied, because time does not erode duty, nor the vision we once shared. You are here because you know that too. Luciran's jaw tightened. You speak of duty? After everything? After the fall? After Fulgrim abandoned us to become a god of decadence? Fulgrim's betrayal does not erase the perfection we once sought, Estrel said, stepping forward. We were meant to be more than his instruments, more than what he made of us. You know this. Luciran stared into his brother's eyes. You speak of vision, Estrel, but I see a prison built from memory. This ship is a mausoleum to your pride. You are chasing ghosts. A flicker of something passed across Estrel's face. Pain, perhaps, or something darker. Then why are you here, Luciran? If not to chase them with me? Silence stretched between them. The answer hovered at the edge of Luciran's tongue, but it was not simple, not clean. It was grief. It was rage. It was the need to understand how they had fallen so far, and whether any of it could be salvaged. I came, Luciran said quietly, because if there is anything left of us that is worth saving, it begins here. Estrel nodded once. Then come. Walk with me. They moved deeper into the ship. The halls of the Solaris Reborn were filled with statuary and relics, memorials to fallen brothers, locked behind stasis fields, forever preserved in the prime of their glory. They passed beneath murals painted in the earliest days of the Great Crusade. The Emperor in radiant gold, Fulgrim at his side, blade raised high, and behind him a sea of warriors, Luciran, Estrel, Valeric, and others, now dead or scattered. Estrel paused at one. This was the day we brought Kamor Prime into compliance, he said. Do you remember? You stood beside me in the Grand Plaza. You took the final oath with me as the twin suns set. Lucerin studied the image. He did remember. He remembered the warmth of victory, the pride of their brotherhood. But he also remembered what came after. The seeds of rot, the first whispers of indulgence. That was before we learned that perfection could be corrupted, Lucarin said. Aestrel turned. Or perhaps, before we learned that corruption can be perfected. Lucarin stopped. Is that what you think we're doing here? Perfecting corruption. Is that what this relic represents? This relic, Aestrel said, gesturing around, them, is not merely a ship. It is the crucible of rebirth. I have gathered the purest remnants of our legion, those who did not fall fully to chaos, those who remembered the vision Fulgrim betrayed. We are few, but we are still Emperor's children, true ones. We can rise again, not as his thralls, but as something greater. You seek to rebuild an empire, Lucerin said. But at what cost? Aestrel's expression darkened. At whatever cost it takes. The word struck Lucerin like a blade. You would damn us all to chase a memory, he said bitterly. We are not gods, Aestrel. We were never meant to be. And yet we were shaped by the hand of one, Aestrel replied. Do not confuse humility with cowardice, Lucarin. The galaxy is broken. The Imperium is a shell. The traitors revel in madness. But we can be something else. The bridge between what was and what must be. You want control, Lucerin said. You want power. Not redemption. Aestrel didn't deny it. I want order. I want beauty restored. And I want our names to mean something again. Lucerin stepped back, his voice a whisper. Even if it means betrayal. Even if it means becoming the thing we once swore to destroy. Especially then, Aestrel said. Lucerin turned his back on the mural, on the memory, on the echo of who they once were. Then you are more lost than I thought. A cold silence settled between them. And yet, neither reached for a blade. Not yet. Instead, Aestrel extended a hand. Stay, he said. See what I've built. Speak with the others. Not all of them agree with me. Some are like you, wounded, cautious. But they stayed. Because they know something is coming, Lucerin. Something terrible. The galaxy is falling, faster than even terror will admit. And when the end comes, we will need a banner that is not blackened by madness. Lucerin looked at the offered hand. It trembled slightly. Not with weakness, with hope. That, more than anything, terrified him. He did not take the hand. Not yet. But he did not turn away. Not yet. Instead, he nodded once, barely. Then show me, he said. Show me what remains of our brothers. And I will decide whether any of this deserves to survive. And so Aestrel led him deeper into the heart of the Solaris reborn, toward choices, old ghosts, and truths long buried. The descent had begun. The reclaimed stood in silence. Lucerin stood before them in a chamber of broken thrones, an ancient war council room once polished in ivory and gold, now veiled in dust and low lit by amber lumen globes. Shadows flickered across faces that did not speak, but studied. Some leaned forward, their features bearing the haggard strain of unspoken regret. Others wore their scars as symbols of defiance. Veterans all, those who had survived the madness of the long war, and returned not as gods or monsters, but men burned by what they had witnessed. Aestrel's voice had brought them together. But Lucerin knew words were not enough to command loyalty in this graveyard of broken ideals. He paced the room slowly, his boots echoing against the hollow floor. With each step, he passed faces that stirred half-remembered names, Calistar the Blade, whose voice had once carried above legions, Viraeus the Silent, who had sealed his mouth shut after the fall, and Theron Sol, a brother once thought dead at Terra's walls. They were the reclaimed, not of Fulgrim's spawn, not of the demon prince's painted nightmares. These were the few who had resisted the full plunge into madness, and who now clung to some fragment of who they once were. Lucaran stopped before the dais. "I see the ghosts of what we were," he said at last, his voice raw. "And I wonder if that is all we are, reflections without substance circling the drain of memory." Silence. Then a voice rose, quiet but firm. "Then why are you here, Lucaran?" It was Theron. His helm was off, his face worn and weathered, a line of sutured scars stretching from jaw to brow. Lucaran met his gaze, because I hoped, some part of me hoped, that we were more than that something survived after Fulgrim turned from the Emperor, after Istvan, after Terra, after the Eye swallowed us. He turned to Estrel. "But hope is not enough. Not now." Estrel's expression was unreadable. "You still doubt," he said. "I doubt everything," Lucaran replied, "including myself. But that is why I still have a soul." Theron's voice, now sharper. "Speak plainly, brother. What is it you fear?" Lucaran hesitated. "That this is not rebirth," he said, "but stagnation. That we wear the colours of the Emperor's children, yet deny what they became. That we gather in silence not to build something new, but to avoid looking at what we've become." He looked around the room, meeting every eye. "You speak of rebuilding," he said. "But how? As what? Another warband drifting in the void? Another echo of a dream that died 10,000 years ago? Fulgrim became a god. He twisted perfection into madness. You speak of rising above that. But I ask, have you truly severed his influence?" It was Calistar who stood. "Yes," he said flatly. "We severed it with blood and fire. When Fulgrim ascended, he sent his emissaries to collect those who still bore his gene seed. We resisted, fought them, killed them. Some of us died screaming as the warp clawed at their minds. But we survived, not as champions, as pariahs." "Then why still bear his name?" Lucaran asked. A moment of pause, and then Estrel stepped forward. "Because we were never his." He raised a closed fist. "Fulgrim stole what we were. But he did not make us. The Emperor did. And I will not surrender our name to a god of lies. I will drag it out of the mire and make it whole again, even if it kills me." Emotion edged into his voice now, cracked and human. "I do not offer salvation, Lucaran. I offer struggle. I offer exile, pain, and perhaps, a legacy not written in madness. A remnant of what the Emperor's children were meant to be." Lucaran stared into his brother's eyes, and there he saw the truth. Estrel was not a madman clinging to ruins. He was a man who had already died long ago, and was now clawing his way back toward the light with bloodied hands. "I will not kneel to Fulgrim," Lucaran said, "and I will never wear the armour of traitors." Estrel bowed his head. "Then don't kneel. Stand with us, and choose a new path." Another silence, and then Viraeus, the Silent, stepped forward. He reached into a sealed casket and drew forth a helm. Lucaran recognized it. The colours were wrong, silver now, trimmed in black, but the shape was unmistakable. It was his, or it had been, before Istvan, before it all burned. It had been repaired. "Your brothers kept it," Estrel said, "waiting, not for you, but for what you might become." Lucaran stared at the helm. He saw 1,000 years of failure in its reflection, 1,000 years of blood and exile, He saw himself on Terra's walls, screaming as brothers fell. He saw Fulgrim's laughing face as he abandoned them. He saw the children of Slaanesh howling in decadent agony. And then he saw something else. A choice. He reached forward and took the helm. Not as a symbol of allegiance, but as a burden accepted. "I will stay," he said. A quiet exhalation moved through the room. Not applause, not triumph, but understanding. "And if you find I am wrong," Aestrel said, almost whispering, "then end me. End all of us. For I would rather die in pursuit of something pure than live forever in chains." Lucerin looked around the chamber. The Reclaimed nodded, not in unison, but in solidarity. And far beyond the hull of the Solaris Reborn, stars blinked into silence. The warp whispered, the Imperium groaned beneath its weight, and somewhere, deep in the eye, Fulgrim's laughter twisted through unreality. But here, in this broken place, something stirred, not glory, something colder. Resolve. The Solaris Reborn slipped between the stars like a phantom, veiled in a shroud of silence. Her hull bore no heraldry, save a single broken aquila etched in black. Once, she had screamed across the galaxy in triumph, delivering warriors of the Third Legion to war zones that shook the heavens. Now, she drifted, less a warship, more a mausoleum wrapped in memory. Lucerin stood in the Strategium's darkened observation deck, eyes fixed on a dying star beyond the viewport. The sun was collapsing, not in violent supernova, but in slow, inevitable exhaustion, its fire guttering out like the breath of a fading god. It had no name. No worlds orbited it. It was simply a symbol, chosen by Aestrel for the first act of their rebirth. "We're nearing the target," came the voice of Brother Ennius, one of the Reclaimed's last true navigators. Lucerin did not look away from the viewport. "Any response from the surface?" Ennius hesitated. "None." "The listening post is silent, just like the others." Lucerin nodded. "Then it's already begun." The dying star wasn't just symbolic, it was a warning. They were being hunted. The Reclaimed had begun reaching out, subtly, cautiously, over the past decade. Not to the Imperium, but to other wayward sons of the legions. Wordless gestures, encoded signals, old frequencies buried beneath layers of distortion. An invitation, not a command. And something had begun to answer. But in equal measure, something else had awakened. The first sign had come from the edge of Segmentum Tempestus, a station converted into a makeshift shrine by an offshoot of the Night Lords. They had shown curiosity toward Aestrel's creed. No allegiance, just silence and a promise to meet. By the time Lucerin and a small retinue arrived, the outpost was gone. Not bombarded, not ransacked, erased. No blood, no wreckage, no vox logs. Only a message carved into the metal where the command throne once sat. "We see you. We remember." Lucerin had recognized the words. Not chaos, not the Imperium. Something older. The Phoenicians' children. Fulgrim's chosen. Those who had embraced his demonhood fully and spread his gospel of excess and perfection. They had become more than warbands. They had become a cult, a network of pleasure worlds and horror vaults, seeded across the eye and beyond. A kingdom of nightmares in service of the Prince of Excess. And now they were watching. The Reclaimed's drop site was an ancient relay moon, once part of the old Astronomicon web before the heresy had severed its link. The surface was pitted and eroded, its vox towers long collapsed. And yet Aestrel had chosen it, because beneath it, buried deep in the regolith, lay a vault sealed during the scouring. One of the original gene seed caches of the Emperor's children. Not corrupted, Astrel had said, not touched, locked away before the fall reached them. And if that was true, if even one viable seed remained, then the reclaimed would have something more than a name. They would have a future. Lucerin led the insertion team himself. Astrel stayed behind, not out of fear, but necessity. The Phoenix Command, his core of loyalists, remained aboard the Solaris, monitoring for warp sign. If Fulgrim's children found them, retreat would be impossible. The air inside the moon's vault was stale, the walls adorned with rusting aquilers and sigils of a past long dead. Lucarin felt the pull of memory in every corridor. They reached the vault entrance, sealed by triple cogitator lock, encoded in the pre-heresy gene matrix. Ennius and the tech adept Vaskar began decoding the security interface. Hours passed. Lucerin kept watch. He did not feel them arrive, but he heard the scream. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was joy, something unnatural and shrieking, as if ecstasy had been folded into violence. Bolter fire erupted from the north corridor. One of the reclaimed fell, his torso bursting in a spray of liquefied bone. A figure emerged from the gloom, gliding across the floor, clad in armor that shimmered like flayed pearl and mirrored glass. An emperor's child, but not one of them. This one was a servant of Fulgrim. His face was a rictus of surgical perfection, lips cut into an eternal grin, eyes replaced with jeweled augmetics. His sword was not metal, but sound. Every swing a scream of beauty designed to kill. Lucerin, the thing whispered. The lost blade, the pale phoenix. Our father remembers you. Lucerin raised his bolter and answered with fire. The reclaimed fought like revenants, unrelenting and wordless, in that dark pit beneath the stars. It was not a battle. It was a reckoning. The Fulgrimite warriors moved with unnatural grace, their armor melting and reforming like liquid porcelain. Some screamed hymns as they fought. Others wept, overcome by the art of violence. Lucarin did not scream. He fought in silence, his blade remembering old patterns. One by one, his brothers fell. Vaskar died, sealing the inner vault. Ennius was impaled through the chest by a harp-string blade, whispering his final coordinates into the vox with trembling fingers. Lucerin held the line, alone now, the vault door behind him humming with activation runes. Then the sound stopped, not because the enemy had fallen, but because they had withdrawn. A figure stepped forward, not adorned in flamboyant splendor, but in simple gold-trimmed violet. His face was veiled, his posture regal. You have gone far, Lucerin, he said, but you are not beyond redemption. Lucerin recognized the voice. Valcora. Valcora had been his sword brother at Terra. He had led the charge up the Imperial Palace's walls, singing as the fire consumed them. When Fulgrim ascended, Valcora had knelt. He had kissed the serpent's claw. Now he stood here, untouched by time, seemingly unchanged. You fight for ghosts, Valcora said gently. Come with us. There is still beauty to be made. We can craft a new empire, not of shame, but of perfection. Lucerin stared at him, and then, wordlessly, pressed the activation rune. Behind him, the vault hissed open. Lights flickered on, revealing rows of stasis chambers, each bearing the sealed imprint of untainted gene seed. Dozens, perhaps more. A future. Valcora paused. You would choose dust and memory over me. Lucerin's voice was calm. I would choose freedom. Valcora's smile faltered. For that, you will suffer. The warp bled into the chamber, shadows flickering with impossibility. But before Valcora could strike, the ceiling shook. The Solaris Reborn had fired a precision bombardment. The chamber shuddered, rocks tumbling. Lucerin grabbed the vault's cogitator core and turned to run. Behind him, Valcora stood still, the air warping around him. "This is only the beginning, Lucerin," he whispered. "The Phoenician remembers, and he forgives." Lucerin emerged into the light of the dying star, bloodied but alive. Estrel awaited him on the landing ramp, silent. Lucerin handed him the core. "Viable?" Estrel asked. Lucerin nodded once, and then looked up, past the horizon, past the vault, past the ruined moon, into the darkness where stars had gone missing. "They're coming," he said. Estrel said nothing. He simply turned and walked inside. The Reclaimed had won a victory, but now the war had begun. Aboard the Solaris Reborn, the stasis vault hummed with a quiet thrum, less the sound of machinery and more like the breathing of unborn gods. Suspended in icy blue light, rows of sealed gene seed canisters hovered in gravitic cradles, untouched by corruption. They were relics of a time before madness, before Fulgrim's fall, before the Third Legion bled its soul dry for the sake of perfection. Lucerin stood among them in silence. His armor was scoured clean, but the scent of battle still clung to his presence. Ozone, oil, the ghost of blood. He had not spoken since their return. Not truly. He merely stood in vigil, hand resting lightly on the hilt of his blade, eyes fixed on a single canister. Estrel entered without ceremony. "The vault has been sealed. We've rerouted the power grid. These will remain intact, even if the rest of the ship dies." Lucerin didn't turn. "What does it matter?" he said, voice flat. "We've stolen the past. But the future still belongs to them." Estrel approached slowly, unarmored now, dressed in a simple mantle of dust-grey silk. His face bore no expression, but his voice was quieter than usual. Less conviction, more gravity. "Fulgrim's spawn are many, but they are not invincible. We have proof now. Gene seed untouched, blood unsullied. The dream lives." Lucerin finally turned, his expression hollow. "They will come for it." Valcora said as much. "We're not hiding anymore." "No," Estrel agreed. "We're not." He gestured, and the chamber darkened, save for a single stasis pod. This one was older. Its systems, unlike the others, were not fully cryonic. Instead, it shimmered with a faint golden shimmer of suspended biostasis. A heartbeat could be heard, barely audible, measured, slow, alive. "This," Estrel said, "was taken from Station C-41 on Persephone's Reach, one of the pre-Unity black sites, Terra's hidden vaults. The genetic markers align with the earliest adaptations of the Third Legion's Alpha Seed." Lucerin's brow furrowed. "A prototype." Estrel nodded. "Perhaps the first, or one of the first. A blank slate, pure but empty. No mind, no soul. Only potential." Lucerin stepped closer. "I thought you said we weren't to play the part of the old gods." "We're not," Estrel said, "but we must make choices they were too arrogant to consider." He turned to face his brother fully now. "If we are to rebuild, not in the image of the Imperium or the traitor legions, but something beyond, we need more than warriors." Lucerin didn't answer. He stared at the pod. "I see what you fear," Estrel said softly. "You think we will become them." Lucerin's jaw tightened. "You still believe we never did." Later, in the dimness of the Librarium Chapel, the choir of silence sang. They were not psychers, not anymore. Their minds had been stripped bare during the early years of the long retreat, when the warp had begun to whisper too sweetly. In place of psychic might, they had become vessels of resonance, using harmonic frequencies and encoded song to anchor their ship's wards. Music, once the Third Legion's pride, had become their shield. Lucerin watched them through the incense haze, the pale smoke curling like memory. He remembered the old songs, the war canticles of Phoenicia, the symphony of triumph sung during the pacification of Sarosh. He had been a captain then, newly elevated, proud, eager, and so blind. Aestrel stood beside him, the two men unmoving as the choir sang in subharmonic pulses, tones meant not for ears, but for the bones and blood. "You wanted to speak of the other signal," Lucerin said. Aestrel inclined his head. "Yes, it came while you were within the vault, buried under 7 layers of distortion. Old Legion cipher." But fragmented Lucerin's gaze narrowed. "Origin." A pause. "Istvan V." Lucerin's breath caught. No words came. That name was not spoken lightly. The place of their first betrayal. The world where the Third had drawn its blade across the throat of brotherhood. "It's impossible," Lucerin said quietly. "That world burned. We made certain of it." Aestrel's voice dropped. "And yet, the signal exists, repeating, intermittent. A distress call, perhaps. Or something else." Lucerin turned away, his fist clenched. "It's a trap." "Perhaps," Aestrel admitted. "But if there is something left, something buried beneath the ash, it could change everything." Lucerin didn't speak, but his eyes, for the first time in years, burned, not with hope, but with old festering wounds. Elsewhere on the Solaris, the surviving reclaimed gathered in the cloistered vaults of the primogenitor deck. The Phoenix Command reviewed the vault's recovery, warily eyeing the list of confirmed fallen. 24 names, good men, silent brothers, gone. Among them, Brother Ennius. Captain Thorn, once a Terran-born sergeant, elevated by Lucerin himself, paced before the others, his expression sour. "We've shed blood for ghosts," he snapped, "and in doing so, drawn the attention of every demon-spawned degenerate under Fulgrim's twisted banner." He gestured toward the holograph projection of the stasis pods. "And for what? Flesh. We can't even implant them without proper incubation. The apothecarian has withered. We don't even have the facilities to train new aspirants." A younger warrior, Cassian, stepped forward. "What would you have us do? Bury the past and embrace oblivion?" "No," Thorn said. "I would have us fight. Not like shadows, but lions. Let the galaxy know that not all Emperor's children bowed to madness. Let them hear our wrath, not our regrets." The room fell silent. Then came the voice of Aestrel, calm, clear, cutting. "No, we are not lions anymore. That time is dead." He stepped into the circle, radiating quiet authority. "We are ghosts, and ghosts do not conquer. They remind." They warn. Lucerin appeared behind him. "We go to Istvan." Murmurs. Shocked silence. "You cannot be serious," Thorn said. "It's cursed. A tomb. What could possibly—" "I left something there," Lucerin said, eyes distant. "What?" Cassian asked. Lucerin stared at the darkness. "My soul." As preparations began, as warp engines screamed their slow awakening, a message pulsed quietly through the void, buried beneath centuries of static. An old Legion Vox code encoded with dissonant harmonic markers. Unknown origin. Its words were few, but they struck like a thunderbolt. To the sons who remember. The garden still lives. Come home and far away, in a place that had forgotten the light of loyal stars. Something ancient stirred beneath blackened soil. A face from before the fall, still watching, still waiting. Warp travel is a scream without sound, a tidal distortion of perception and time, a storm that tears at the threads of the soul. Within it, even the gods forget their names. The Solaris Reborn slid through that hateful ocean with the grace of a dying comet, its hull etched in warding canticles, its Geller field pushed to the limits. Through its reinforced mine shielding, the whispers still clawed. Lucerin stood at the bridge's edge, hands clasped behind his back, gazing into the endless void, stars stretched into bleeding lines, and reality bent into a grotesque dance, a ship of ghosts bound for the grave of loyalty. Behind him, Captain Thorn and Magos Hermetic Cultran observed the astropathic echoes. Cultran's mechadendrites twitched. "We are nearing Istvan's coordinates," Cultran reported, voice monotone but strained. "But there is interference." Lucerin turned. "Interference?" The Magos hesitated, a rare, almost human pause. "There is a psychic wound in the void here. A scar from the drop site massacre that has never closed. The warp rages near it, like a dog circling a pit. The signal we traced, it pulses from the scar itself." Captain Thorn scowled. What manner of lunatic would dwell in such a place? Lucerin already knew. Only those who had never left it. The Solaris dropped from warp at the edge of the Istvan system, emerging from unreality into silence. Before them stretched the broken remains of a graveyard, ship hulks, charred moons, and shattered orbital rings. Istvan V, the Butcher's Garden, turned slowly in space, its surface a twisted tapestry of ruin. No life, no warmth. But the signal remained, stronger now, like a heartbeat, a call across centuries. "The garden still lives. Come home." They descended into the ash. The atmosphere of Istvan was thick with iron and memory. The surface had not healed. Black glass plains stretched endlessly, scoured by orbital bombardment. The bones of Astartes littered the fields in fragments, some still locked in death embraces, others crumbling into dust beneath the wind. Lucerin knelt beside a shattered helm, lifting it gently. The mark of the iron hands glared back at him. "I fought here," he murmured. "I raised my blade against brothers. And when the truth returned to me, it was too late." Cassian approached from behind, eyes wide beneath his helm. He was the youngest among them, born of war, but not of this massacre. "This is where the third broke," Cassian said. Lucerin nodded. "No, this is where we were broken, by pride, by lies, by Fulgrim's vanity." The massacre only confirmed what the song had already begun. They moved deeper into the desolation, drawn toward the coordinates. At the center of the ancient battlefield stood the ruins of an Imperial observatory, half buried beneath slag and soot, its spire cracked but upright. Its walls still bore the heraldry of unity, the eagle long since defaced. Inside, the signal pulsed louder, and they found him. He was seated upon a throne of broken armor and rusted blades, half consumed by time, pale, emaciated. Wires fed into his flesh like parasitic roots. His armor was that of the Third Legion, but its hue had faded to ghost white. A golden aquila remained scorched into his breastplate, its wings warped by fire. His eyes opened. They were the color of voided stars. Lucerin froze. "Severin." The figure smiled. Slow. Thin. "Ah." The song still carries. Cassian stepped back, aghast. "You know him?" Lucerin nodded once. "Severin Cauldres. Once the choir master of the Phoenician zone. The first among the legions voice-born he stayed." Astrel whispered. "When we fled, he remained here." Severin rose. His movements were slow, fluid, unnatural. "I remained," he echoed. "To remember, to suffer, to ensure someone else did too." He walked among them now, like a corpse gifted motion. "The others forgot," he continued. "The traitors forged new identities. The loyalists buried the shame. But this place remembers. I made sure of it." Lucerin stepped forward. You sent the signal. Severin smiled again. I was the signal. He gestured, and the air shimmered. Vox static sang from hidden emitters, discordant, mournful. Voices, layered atop voices. A symphony of the dead. They listened. I saw my captain fall to his knees before the serpent of Fulgrim. We were lied to by golden promises, lied to by song. I wept when I burned the seventh. We deserve to die, but we live, and in our living, we remember. Severin stood tall now. This world is our tomb, but also our truth. He turned to Luceran, eyes burning. You came because you still doubt. You want to build something pure, but you must not forget what happened here. What we became, Luceran's jaw clenched. I do not seek redemption. Good, Severin said softly. There is none. A pause. But there is clarity. And in that clarity, a choice. That night, beneath the broken stars of Istvan, Luceran walked alone among the shattered relics of fallen legions. Helmets, chainswords, carved names lost to time. He knelt by a blackened Aquila standard, still upright in the ash. He remembered the voice of his Primarch, the perfection in every word, the flawless lie. He remembered the screams of loyalists beneath their blades. He remembered silence. And then he spoke aloud. No more songs, no more masks, no more lies from the darkness. Severin watched him and smiled. At dawn, if such a thing existed on this cursed world, Luceran returned to his brothers. His voice was calm. We take what remains. We return to the stars. We do not rebuild. We remind. Let the Imperium see what it buried. Let the traitors hear what they forgot. Aistral placed a hand over his heart. And Severin? Lucaran looked toward the ruins. He stays. A monument of memory, Captain Thorn looked out toward the horizon, where old fire still smouldered beneath the soil. Then what are we, Luceran? Luceran's answer came without hesitation. We are the echo. We are the price time does not heal all wounds. It buries them, and some wounds awaken. The Solaris reborn tore free from the gravity well of Istvan V, like a phoenix born from ashes, its hull still scorched by the sorrows of that cursed world. Inside, the silence was not absence, it was purpose, and it weighed heavier than any funeral dirge. Luceran stood in the strategium, armoured and still, watching ghost signals flow across the hollow construct of the galaxy. Dozens of transmissions intercepted from across the segmentum tempestus blinked with hidden pattern. A voice joined him, Aistral quiet, but not hesitant. We've begun to receive responses, fragmented, encoded. But loyal Luceran didn't turn to her. His eyes remained locked on the stars. Who responded? Chthonian warbands, isolated 3rd Legion elements near Medusa, and one from Chemos that stirred him. Chemos is ash. Yes, she said, but not empty. Luceran turned now, slowly. Details. She handed him the scroll slate, its runes flickering with cipher-cracked code. A signal looped within, garbled but unmistakable. To the one who remembers, to the one who bears the shame, we are not yet gone. Return to the mother world. Find the last reflection. Luceran's voice was quiet. I thought we buried all of Chemos in the wake of Fulgrim's fall. Aistral's eyes narrowed. Perhaps something buried itself deeper. The journey to Chemos took 17 warp translations. Each jump clawed at the soul, Severin's words echoing louder with every league. They emerged into the dead light of the Chemos system, where the star bled orange across the void. Chemos itself, pale, hollowed, turned slowly in the shadows of its ruined orbital platforms. Strip-mined continents, hollow cities, a mausoleum built by hunger and pride. They descended again into ghosts. The capital hive of Calaxia, once the heart of Fulgrim's cultured idealism, was now a tomb of collapsed arches and marble dust. The libraries were cinders. The statues, effigies of perfection, stood broken, faces shattered first. But amid it all, one structure remained untouched, a palace, or rather, the mirror of one. The spires of the Palatine Reflectory, once used by the nobles of Chemos to meditate on their own beauty, still stood gleaming. Gold had not tarnished, silver had not flaked. It was unnatural. Inside they found the last reflection. She was not what Luciran expected. A woman, unarmored, unaugmented, standing in the center of a mirror hall that stretched into warped infinity. Her skin shimmered with alchemic sheen, her eyes glowing faintly with violet light, and on her brow, a circlet shaped like a serpent devouring itself. Cassian stepped forward instinctively. "What is she?" Luciran raised a hand to halt him. "She is what Fulgrim promised." The woman smiled, and when she spoke, her voice was not her own. "I am what remains of the god within." The serpent spoke through her, soft, sensuous, terrible. It told Lucaran of the refined dream, a hidden shard of Fulgrim's own mind, cast adrift before his complete transformation. A piece of the Phoenician's original desire, not for power, but for unity, harmony, perfection unmarred by demons or excess. And it had taken root here, where mirrors had once reflected man's beauty. "I have watched you," it whispered. "You are not like the others. You seek not victory, not redemption, but memory, truth." Luciran stared into its eyes, his own face reflected 1,000 times in the glass around them, each iteration twisted slightly, subtly, into something not quite him. "I am not a savior," he said. "No," it replied, "but you are a weapon, a wound, and wounds can speak truths no balm ever could." A pause. "Join with me, Luciran. Let me gift you clarity. Let us become the echo that never dies." He turned. "A way I came to build nothing." The being's voice softened. "Then you are ready." Outside the palace, the air grew colder. The Solaris crew sensed it first. The way the ruins seemed to breathe, the way shadows grew longer. Kaltran the tech priest staggered from his data throne in the lower holds, eyes sparking with neural discharge. It speaks in code beneath the planet," he hissed. "A machine code, older than Fulgrim. Something beneath Chemos has awakened." Luciran descended with his warriors into the planet's underbelly. They found it beneath the crust, encased in crystal and glass. A war engine, a Palatine oracle, prototype psychotronic weaponry designed during the earliest days of the Emperor's expansion, long before the heresy. It was said that the Third Legion had designed it as a final resort, a mirror not to reflect the self, but to shatter it. Cassian stared into the control node, its surface flickering with images from his mind. "It sees us." Astrol's voice trembled. "No, it remembers us." Luciran stood before it, and it spoke. "Luciran il Divinatus, son of the Third, survivor of betrayal, bearer of shame. Would you unleash me?" He looked at his reflection, at the myriad broken selves staring back. "No," he said. "I would become you." They bound the oracle to the Solaris reborn. It merged willingly, like a puzzle piece finally returned to its place. With it, Luciran's ship no longer drifted as a relic, but as a spectre of judgment, a mirror with teeth. And across the stars, hidden Legion fragments began to awaken. Chthonian warbands painted the old sigil of the Third across rusted hulls. Renegade psychers whispered Luceran's name into warp echoes. And on Terra, in the secret archives beneath the Imperial Palace, a red-robed inquisitor found a forbidden cipher pulsing again after 5,000 years. We are the reflection unending. We remember what you buried. We will return. Aboard the Solaris, Luceran stood in his sanctum, watching the stars fold. He wore no mask now, no gilded helm. Only his scarred face, pale in the starlight, eyes haunted. Astral entered. Where do we go now? He did not look at her. We go where the lies are deepest, where empires are proudest. We show them the mirror. He touched the glass beside him, and we let them see. The mirror does not lie. It merely waits. Across the stars, in the cold silence of the veiled nebula, the Solaris Reborn emerged like a judgment long delayed. Its hull shimmered not with the arrogance of polished gold, but with the muted sheen of obsidian, silent, reflective, terrible. Once the vessel of a forgotten line of the Emperor's children, it now bore no legion heraldry, no sigil of loyalty, only the mark of the mirror etched in burning silver across its prow. The oracle was awake. Chemos had given Luceran a voice. The oracle had given him purpose, and now he would return it to the Imperium that had long since cast him aside. On the shrine world of Alabaster Prime, pilgrims gathered by the millions beneath towering statues of the Emperor. They came to pray, to weep, to kneel beneath the stern gazes of long-dead saints who had never known mercy. They did not know that death had already come for them. The first to see the Solaris reborn were the Vox adepts of the orbital watchtowers. They died without understanding, silence blooming through their minds like dark blossoms. The oracle's signal, a mirror scream of forgotten frequencies, pierced their skulls, unmaking thought. When the ship descended, it did not fire. It reflected. Mass reactive rounds aimed at it returned along impossible trajectories. Last blasts coiled backward through time and struck their owners. Psyker wards detonated inward. What they attacked became their undoing. The Solaris made no sound, only silence and the flickering image of their own terror. Luceran descended with 50 warriors, none in standard livery, none with banners. Each bore the mark of Chemos's echo, the Ouroboros serpent circlet, and on their chests, mirrors, worn where Aquilas once gleamed. The ecclesiarchy sent its guard, its preachers, its flame. All failed. Luceran did not kill indiscriminately. He walked through the Hall of Triumph and stood before the Grand Canoness herself, her armor gilded, her heart trembling beneath it. "You worship a corpse," he said. "Do you know his face?" The Canoness drew her blade. "I know his sacrifice." Lucaran's voice was soft. "Then you know nothing." He raised a hand, and the oracle's power surged. The statues cracked. The murals wept blood. Every monument to imperial truth reflected itself and broke. When the Canoness struck him, he did not parry. Her blade pierced his side. But it was not pain that followed. It was understanding. He stared at her as blood flowed down his armor. "You believe because you must. Because if you stop, the screams will return," she faltered. "What are you?" He stepped forward, pressing her own blade deeper into him. "I am what the Emperor forgot. I am the child of the mirror." And then, as she looked into his eyes, she saw, not him, herself. The mirror showed her the child she'd abandoned to serve the creed, the truths she had rewritten, the fear she buried beneath iron faith. She dropped the blade and wept. Luceran did not kill her. That was never the point. He left her kneeling, facing a truth greater than death. Word spread of a ship that did not kill, but unmade, of warriors that wore no colours, only the sins of those they faced. Some said they were ghosts of the Third Legion. Others called them Echo Marines, children of the Reflection. But all knew this: they were not loyal, nor were they traitor. They were something new. Cassian paced the reflection chamber aboard the Solaris, gazing into the Oracle's glow. Astrel watched him, arms folded. Still doubting? He turned to her. I doubt because I remember. I remember what we did at Istvan. I remember our brothers choking on their own ambition. I remember Fulgrim, his smile before it cracked. Estrel's voice was iron. And yet, here you are. Because I must be. Then you understand. Lucerin entered. His wound from alabaster was already knitting, but his face was tired, older. Cassian, he said, do you remember the Arkenhold Accord? Cassian frowned. The treaty between Fulgrim and the Mechanicum expedition on Alphathorn. Lucerin nodded. Yes, a pact built on lies. They gave us forbidden knowledge in exchange for culture. Art for blasphemy. Cassian remembered. We took the pact. Fulgrim called it necessary evolution. Lucerin's eyes darkened, and what we became was no longer art. Later, alone in the sanctum, Lucerin stood before the Oracle once more. He whispered, they think we are enemies, that we seek destruction, but they are wrong. He touched the mirror. I want them to see. Truly see. The Oracle's voice answered, soft as ever. Then you must show them what they have become. Lucerin closed his eyes. And what I've become? The Oracle did not reply, because some truths must be faced alone. On the bridge, Caltran the tech priest uttered an invocation to the machine god, one eye sparking from overuse. Incoming signal, High Gothic. Origin, Segmentum Solar. Designation, Sigillite clearance. A silence fell across the deck. Lucerin appeared behind him. Display it. The hololith flared. A figure emerged, hooded, crimson-robed. Augmetic cords hung from his spine like vestments. He bore no name, but his voice carried the weight of ancient war. You are Lucerin Il Divinatus. You are declared renegade under Imperial edict. Lucerin said nothing. The voice continued. Yet your methods do not align with chaos. You do not bear the mark. Your weapons reflect, rather than destroy. You are an anomaly. Still, Lucerin was silent. The figure's tone shifted. You do not have to remain outside. There are factions within the Imperium, sympathetic to understanding. Return. Speak with us. Lucerin stepped forward, his face in the light. I remember Malcador. The figure stiffened. He once told Fulgrim, there are truths that do not serve the living. Lucerin paused. I am not the living. And with that, he severed the link. The stars outside trembled, not from war, from fear. It began with dreams. Across the segmentum, from forge moons to hive citadels, they came like an infection of the soul. Visions that dripped into the minds of astropaths, navigators, and even the faithful Amira that whispered, not in words, but in the weight of things long denied. Fathers seen in moments of cruelty. Children forgotten in pursuit of duty. Battles fought for reasons now lost to time. The Imperium called it a mimetic plague. The Inquisition scrambled to contain it. But what do you do when the sickness is truth? On Carmenthia Tertius, an entire regiment of Astra Militarum laid down their arms mid-deployment and began reciting the names of their ancestors. Each name summoned regret. Each regret was a wound that never healed. On Sota's ruins, a lone librarian from the scythes of the Emperor stood beneath shattered domes and carved the Ouroboros into the dust with his gauntlet, whispering, "He remembers us." Deep within the Solaris Reborn, Lucerin stood in communion once more. But the oracle was no longer just a mirror. It was becoming. The device shimmered with motion not its own, like something was now pressing against the glass from the other side. Its edges bled fractal geometry, and the chamber pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat that was not his. Cassian watched uneasily. "We are waking something, Lucerin. Something old." "We are not waking it," Lucerin replied quietly. "We are listening. The echoes are changing us." Cassian's voice cracked, equal parts awe and terror. "Our brothers are dreaming while awake. Caltran speaks in binary loops that have no code base. Aestrel doesn't sleep. She hears music in the silence between your words." Lucerin turned slowly. "Would you stop now, Cassian?" Cassian swallowed. "No." And that was the truth. It had gone too far. They were already beyond the veil. The first true confrontation came at Denevar Prime. The custodes arrived, golden demigods, blades gleaming with the light of long-dead suns, eyes devoid of mercy, sent by the High Lords themselves, not to negotiate, not to judge, but to erase. This, the Imperium had decided, was heresy. The Solaris Reborn did not retreat. Lucerin welcomed them. He and Aistral stood on the ashen plains outside the Hive Tower, the glass of the scorched world cracking beneath their boots. They arrived in a storm of grav chariots, their voices silent behind their helms. Their leader, Tyveran of the Auric Blade, stepped forward. His spear shimmered with contained starlight. "You are a ghost of treachery," he said, "and we are here to cast you back into silence." Lucerin removed his helmet. "I am no traitor. I do not kneel to gods, nor do I raise my hand against mankind. I seek only to show it what it has become." Tyvaran's face remained impassive. "We are not here to argue." Lucerin nodded. "I know." They fought without fanfare. Gold met void steel. The echoes screamed. Cassian led the Sons of Reflection into battle. They did not fire. They mirrored. The custody struck with precision honed across 10,000 years, and yet their strikes began to turn subtly, inexplicably. Blade met blade in familiar patterns, familiar rhythms. Then the custodes hesitated, because they began to see. Each warrior who locked eyes with the Son of the Reflection did not face a foe, but themselves. The moment of pride they never atoned for. The brother they let fall. The silence that came after too many victories. Tyveran staggered as his spear was parried, not with might, but grace. He met Lucerin again, breathless, conflicted. "What are you?" Lucerin's voice was not triumphant. "Truth. We do not come to kill you, only to show you the cost of never looking back." The oracle flared behind him, hovering now, unbound from its cradle, a mirror no longer passive. Back aboard the Solaris, Aistral watched the feeds. The custodies had disengaged, not routed, not defeated, shaken. No Imperium transmission followed, no order to pursue. Silence. Cassian leaned against the archway of the chamber, arms crossed. "They weren't ready." "No," Aistral murmured. "They weren't." Caltran entered. His voice modulated and eerie rasped. "There is movement in Segmentum Obscurus. Word of you has spread. The Ordo Astartes is divided." Lucerin appeared behind them. "Divided?" Caltran nodded. "The White Scars sent a message. Some roads must be seen to be chosen." Aistral raised an eyebrow. "They won't help us." "No," Lucerin said. "But they won't hunt us either." The room was still. "We're becoming something," she whispered. "Something beyond legion." Beyond rebellion, Lucerin walked to the oracle, now floating freely, its surface a whirlpool of light and shadow. "No," he said softly. "We're becoming whole." And the oracle answered, not with words, but with memory. A vision bloomed, Fulgrim, before his corruption, staring at his legion with pride, not arrogance, the painter's brush, the warrior's grace, the purpose, a purpose forgotten, a purpose returning. In the crypt citadels of terror, among vaults sealed by orders older than the heresy, the sigillite seal cracked. A robed figure, face unseen, stood before an ancient data coffer. The image of Lucaran flickered into view. The figure did not speak, only placed a trembling hand against the ghostly light, as if remembering something once beautiful, once lost. The death of silence came in the form of a transmission. No encryption, no sigils, no seal of the Imperium. Just a voice, familiar, measured, cruel in its intimacy. "Lucaran, I remember you." The image flickered into the strategium aboard the Solaris Reborn. A dozen voices fell quiet. No machine spirit stirred. The bridge became a tomb, and the ghost they'd buried walked among them once more. Astartes recognized him. Cassian's jaw tensed. Estrel's hand hovered near her blade. Lucaran did not move. His eyes narrowed, not in fear, but recognition. Eidolon, the voice of the past, no longer disfigured, no longer maddened by the noise of Slanesh. His face, reconstructed or perhaps rebuilt, was the face of an older pride. A commander who had once stood at Fulgrim's right hand before corruption, peeled them all into mockeries of art. Eidolon had returned, but not as a demon, not as a slave to the warp. He bore the armor of the Emperor's children, twisted yet tempered, still marked with filigree, but darkened, refined. There were no excesses, no screaming symphony, just discipline. "Do you think you were the only one who remembered what we were?" Eidolon said softly. Lucaran's breath caught. Cassian snarled, stepping forward. "Liar. You were the worst. You revelled in the excess. You led the betrayal." "I did," Eidolon replied without apology. "But we were born into a contradiction, weren't we? We worshipped perfection, and then destroyed ourselves in pursuit of it. What do you think that leaves behind when the ecstasy ends?" He leaned forward, his voice cold. "Regret." Lucaran approached the hololith slowly. "You feel remorse now?" "No. Something worse," Eidolon said. "Clarity." Eidolon had gathered his own sons, not the noise-cursed wrecks of the warbands that roamed the eye, but Astartes, who had abandoned the extremes of sensation and sought something else. Something before Slanesh. A reformation not of spirit, but of vision. They called themselves the Broken Choir. They were not allies, not yet, but they understood. "There is a wound in the warp," Eidolon said. "Your oracle has opened something older than the gods, and the warp fears it." Lucaran nodded. "So do you." Eidolon smiled. "Of course I do." The alliance was fragile. Cassian railed against it. Astrel's blade nearly met Eidolon's throat before she yielded. Even Caltran, usually composed, spoke warnings in ancient Binaric. But Lucaran did not waver. This is what the galaxy refuses to understand. Redemption does not come from purity. It comes from those who have walked through the fire and survived it. He looked into Eidolon's hollow eyes. "I don't trust you, but I believe you." It was enough. Together, they journeyed into the dark. The oracle had begun to sing. not in sound, but in frequency, a psychic chorus that led them to the grave of a forgotten war. Near the edge of Segmentum Tempestus, a star system orphaned by time drifted in slow decay. Its sun had not died, but fled, drawn into a knot in real space that no augur could resolve. The planets hung in orbit like bones frozen in prayer. There, on a moon carved hollow by hands older than humanity, they found it. The Cathedral of the Broken Mirror. No record named it. No ruin spoke of it. But all who stepped foot within it felt the same thing. The memory of what they once were. Statues of marbled warriors stood in symmetrical poses, some Astartes, others unknown. But none were gods. None bore wings, horns, or halos. They bore faces, unmasked, real. The oracle thrummed. Eidolon fell to one knee, not in worship, but awe. This place, Aistral whispered, was made by us. Cassian frowned. Not by the Emperor's children. No, Lucarin said, by those who came before them. The first echoes, the first attempt to remember. And they failed. On the walls, carvings depicted a great sundering, a legion shattered not by war, but by the weight of their own memory, a curse that turned perfection inward until only silence remained. Lucarin traced the murals. They sought truth and were undone by it. Eidolon nodded. As we will be, Cultran's voice crackled. Perhaps, but better to be undone by truth than enslaved by lies. Within the heart of the cathedral was a chamber, a dome without light. The oracle drifted inside, pulsing like a second heart. Lucarin stood beneath it. His voice shook. This is the end. Aistral approached, laying a hand on his shoulder. No, she said. This is the beginning you never had. The oracle's light spilled outward. Visions burned into their minds. They saw Fulgrim before the fall, kneeling at the feet of the Emperor, not in worship, but dialogue. They saw what could have been, what was, in some other strand of possibility. The Legion, not as monsters, but as beauty with purpose. Cassian wept. Eidolon did not, but his fist clenched as if to contain the pain. Lucarin reached toward the oracle. It welcomed him. It reflected him. And in the reflection, he saw not perfection, but peace. Outside the cathedral, ships of the Inquisition appeared in orbit. They bore no warning, no litanies, just judgment and flame. The Solaris Reborn prepared for war once more. Lucarin stepped from the shadows of the dome, now cloaked in a new light. Not divine, not cursed, just real. We've shown them the truth, he whispered. Aistral stood beside him, and they will never forgive us for it. The stars above trembled. The cathedral of the broken mirror burned, not from within, but from above. The ships of the Inquisition rained fire without hesitation, their bombardments executed with mechanical precision. No demands, no calls to parley, no offers of surrender. To them, this place was not a relic. It was a heresy, a living scar on the narrative they so desperately preserved. From the void, fire bloomed in the sky like the eyes of old gods blinking open. The Solaris Reborn shuddered beneath the orbital onslaught. Its void shields flickered as lance strikes scarred its flanks. Within the bridge, Caltran chanted binaric curses, redirecting power and activating the machine spirit's wrath. Cassian stood blood-slick and armored, his voice barking orders, though his mind reeled from the revelation in the cathedral. Aistral moved through the ship like a wraith, rallying the scattered Astartes and cult cells who had followed Lucarin here. Some seeking redemption, others only purpose. But Lucarin stood at the altar beneath the oracle, unmoving. Let them come, he whispered. Aistral found him kneeling, his helm cradled in his hands, his expression one of quiet devastation. "They will not stop," she said. He nodded. "I know. You should run." He looked up at her, tired, but whole in a way he had never been. "I've run from the truth for 10,000 years, and for 10,000 years it chased me." No longer. The oracle pulsed brighter, responding to him, to the certainty in his voice. It no longer trembled or wept or whispered the voices of the past. Now it sang, a slow, mournful hymn, a lament not for what was lost, but for what had almost been. Eidolon entered, his face half-shadowed. "The Inquisition has sent word. One of their lords speaks your name." Lucerin frowned. "Who?" A pause. "Thaddeus Vale." A name like a wound, a memory too sharp to dull. Lucerin exhaled. "Then they've come to finish what I began." Lord Inquisitor Thaddeus Vale, once a child aboard a ruined shrine world, saved by Lucerin's company during the Great Crusade. The boy had knelt before Lucerin's armour, kissed the Aquila, and sworn that he would serve the Emperor with truth. But the years had changed him. Like Lucerin, he had survived betrayal. Unlike Lucerin, he had buried his pain in dogma. Now he stood aboard the flagship Absolution's blade, eyes sunken, voice like iron. Target the cathedral. Eliminate the traitor. Burn the oracle. His sub-commanders hesitated. "We believe there are loyalists among the Astartes, fractured cells seeking redemption." Vale's reply was cold. "There is no redemption. Not for them. Not for him." Inside the cathedral, the light changed. The oracle flared as if sensing its death. Eidolon's warriors raised arms. Cassian rallied what few remained. Caltran activated ancient protocols, awakening a machine buried beneath the cathedral itself, an ark of unknown origin with engines powered by stellar fragments. "Lucerin," Caltran barked, "we can flee. The vessel will carry us. You can still lead." Lucerin turned to him, smiling, soft. "I was never meant to lead, Caltran. Only to remember." Cassian approached, blood dripping from his gauntlet. "Don't make this some tragic myth," he growled. "You survived Istvan. You rebuilt us. Don't die for an echo." Lucerin placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm not dying. I'm giving something back." Eidolon watched in silence. Then, at last, he spoke. "We have made ourselves monsters, Lucerin. Sculpted by gods we did not understand. But you remembered the man you were." Lucerin nodded. "And you remembered you could become him again." Outside, the Inquisition's forces began their descent, drop pods screaming like comets. The cathedral trembled. Explosions tore open the stone and steel. Lucerin walked into the light of the oracle. He removed his armour, piece by piece, until only flesh remained, scarred, tattooed with the names of the fallen, the brothers he'd buried, the wars he'd lost. Upon his back was etched the Aquila, faded and broken. The oracle responded, its light drawing into him. Not possession, not ascension, integration. Lucerin became its final voice, the last echo of the Emperor's children as they were meant to be. He turned to Estrel. She stood at the edge, eyes wide. "Go," he said softly. "Take the Ark. Take the survivors. Tell the galaxy we were not all lost." "What about you?" she asked. "I will remain," Lucerin said. "A memory they cannot erase." Cassian, bleeding and swearing, boarded the Ark with Estrel and Caltran. Eidolon remained for one last glance, his expression unreadable. Then the Ark rose, engines tearing through the dying heavens. Below, the Inquisition struck. Thaddeus Vale led the assault, His boots touched the shattered stones of the cathedral. His stormtroopers spread like flame. But where Lucerin stood, they found only light. The oracle had become him, or he, it. And when Vale raised his bolt pistol, preparing to fire, Lucerin spoke, his voice not bitter, but kind. "I remember you, child." Vale's hand trembled. He fired, and the light consumed them both. From orbit, the moon was torn apart in silence. The cathedral of the broken mirror became dust. The oracle's signal vanished. No trace remained, except those who survived, those aboard the Ark, Cassian, Estrel Cultran, Eidolon. They watched the stars and remembered. In the void, something shifted. A ripple, almost imperceptible. Not chaos, not order, something else. A beginning. The cathedral of the broken mirror burned, not from within, but from above. The ships of the Inquisition rained fire without hesitation, their bombardments executed with mechanical precision. No demands, no calls to parley, no offers of surrender. To them, this place was not a relic. It was a heresy, a living scar on the narrative they so desperately preserved. From the void, fire bloomed in the sky like the eyes of old gods blinking open. The Solaris Reborn shuddered beneath the orbital onslaught. Its void shields flickered as lance strikes scarred its flanks. Within the bridge, Caltran chanted binaric curses, redirecting power and activating the machine spirit's wrath. Cassian stood blood-slick and armoured, his voice barking orders, though his mind reeled from the revelation in the cathedral. Estrel moved, through the ship like a wraith, rallying the scattered Astartes and cult cells who had followed Lucerin here, some seeking redemption, others only purpose. But Lucerin stood at the altar beneath the oracle, unmoving. "Let them come," he whispered. Astral found him kneeling, his helm cradled in his hands, his expression one of quiet devastation. "They will not stop," she said. He nodded. "I know. You should run." He looked up at her, tired, but whole in a way he had never been. "I've run from the truth for 10,000 years, and for 10,000 years it chased me. No longer." The oracle pulsed brighter, responding to him, to the certainty in his voice. It no longer trembled or wept or whispered the voices of the past. Now it sang, a slow, mournful hymn, a lament not for what was lost, but for what had almost been. Eidolon entered, his face half-shadowed. "The Inquisition has sent word. One of their lords speaks your name." Lucerin frowned. "Who?" A pause. "Thaddeus Vale." A name like a wound, a memory too sharp to dull. Lucerin exhaled. "Then they've come to finish what I began." Lord Inquisitor Thaddeus Vale, once a child aboard a ruined shrine world, saved by Lucerin's company during the Great Crusade. The boy had knelt before Lucerin's armour, kissed the Aquila, and sworn that he would serve the Emperor with truth. But the years had changed him. Like Lucerin, he had survived betrayal. Unlike Lucerin, he had buried his pain in dogma. Now he stood aboard the flagship Absolution's blade, eyes sunken, voice like iron. "Target the cathedral. Eliminate the traitor. Burn the oracle." His sub-commanders hesitated. "We believe there are loyalists among the Astartes, fractured cells seeking redemption." Vale's reply was cold. "There is no redemption. Not for them. Not for him." Inside the cathedral, the light changed. The oracle flared as if sensing its death. Eidolon's warriors raised arms. Cassian rallied what few remained. Caltran activated ancient protocols, awakening a machine buried beneath the cathedral itself. An ark of unknown origin with engines powered by stellar fragments. "Lucerin," Caltran barked, "we can flee. The vessel will carry us." You can still lead, Lucerin turned to him, smiling, soft. I was never meant to lead, Keltran. Only to remember. Cassian approached, blood dripping from his gauntlet. Don't make this some tragic myth, he growled. You survived Istvan. You rebuilt us. Don't die for an echo. Lucarin placed a hand on his shoulder. I'm not dying. I'm giving something back. Eidolon watched in silence. Then, at last, he spoke. We have made ourselves monsters, Lucarin. Sculpted by gods we did not understand. But you remembered the man you were. Lucarin nodded. And you remembered you could become him again. Outside, the Inquisition's forces began their descent, drop pods screaming like comets. The cathedral trembled. Explosions tore open the stone and steel. Lucarin walked into the light of the oracle. He removed his armor, piece by piece, until only flesh remained. Scarred, tattooed with the names of the fallen, the brothers he'd buried, the wars he'd lost. Upon his back was etched the Aquila, faded and broken. The oracle responded, its light drawing into him. Not possession, not ascension, integration. Lucarin became its final voice, the last echo of the Emperor's children as they were meant to be. He turned to Estrel. She stood at the edge, eyes wide. Go, he said softly. Take the Ark. Take the survivors. Tell the galaxy we were not all lost. What about you? She asked. I will remain, Lucarin said. A memory they cannot erase. Cassian, bleeding and swearing, boarded the Ark with Astral and Kaltran. Eidolon remained for one last glance, his expression unreadable. Then the Ark rose, engines tearing through the dying heavens. Below, the Inquisition struck. Thaddeus Vale led the assault. His boots touched the shattered stones of the cathedral. His stormtroopers spread like flame. But where Lucarin stood, they found only light. The oracle had become him, or he, it. And when Vale raised his bolt pistol, preparing to fire, Lucarin spoke, his voice not bitter, but kind. I remember you, child. Vale's hand trembled. He fired, and the light consumed them both. From orbit, the moon was torn apart in silence. The cathedral of the broken mirror became dust. The oracle signal vanished. No trace remained, except those who survived, those aboard the Ark. Cassian, Estrel Kaltran, Eidolon. They watched the stars and remembered. In the void, something shifted. A ripple, almost imperceptible. Not chaos, not order, something else. A beginning. There is a silence that exists only in the wake of catastrophe. It is not the stillness of peace, but the silence of aftermath, of embers smouldering where once there was fire, of voices long silenced lingering only as memory. In that silence, the survivors drifted. The Ark, whose name no one could speak, whose origins lay buried in the pre-imperial dark, cut through the void like a ghost. Its hull bore no heraldry, no sigils, no past. It was the vessel of the forgotten, bearing those who had once borne glory. Cassian sat alone in his chapel, his armor dented and caked in dust, blood long dried in the seams. The only light came from the dying lanterns overhead, flickering as though they too mourned. He had not spoken since the cathedral fell, not even to Astral. What words remained? He had followed Lucarin through war, through madness, through the bleeding edge of damnation. And yet never had he understood him more than in the final moment. Not when they fought side by side, not even on Istvan. But in that cathedral, as Lucarin gave himself to light, Cassian had seen it clearly. Redemption is not a gift. It is a price paid in silence, in sacrifice with no promise of return. Eidolon was different now. He wore no helm. His face was deeply lined. his voice quieter. He walked the Ark's halls with the gait of a man who had seen the end of all things and found no triumph in surviving. "They'll call him a traitor," he said to Kaltran, who busied himself restoring the Ark's machine spirit. "A sorcerer." A corrupted idealist, Kaltran did not look up. "They always do," the tech marine replied. "History is the privilege of the unburned." Eidolon frowned. "And us, we are the ashes." In the lower decks, Estrel moved among the wounded, posthuman and mortal alike. Few spoke, fewer still believed, but in the silence a kind of reverence took root. Not worship of Lucaran, no statues or rites, but something deeper. A memory, shared like breath among them. A belief that something pure had existed, if only for a moment, and that it had burned away the lie. One of the human acolytes, barely more than a child, approached her one evening as the stars moved slowly across the viewports. "Is he dead?" the boy asked. She looked at him for a long time. "No," she said. "He just became something else." Meanwhile, the galaxy turned. The Inquisition issued its statement. Luciran of the Emperor's children, heretic. The Cathedral of the Broken Mirror, purged. The Oracle, myth. Lord Inquisitor Thaddeus Vale, killed in action, martyr to the throne. The records were clean, sanitized. The war was declared ended. The heresy buried under 1,000 tons of void-born rubble. No mention of survivors. No mention of light. No mention of choice. But whispers remained. A cult on the edge of the segmentum obscurus spoke of a fire that did not burn, of a man without a name who walked through dreams, restoring forgotten memories. On a broken moon in Ultima, a ruin shimmered where no ruin had been, and in the Codici Archivum of the Order Malleus, encrypted behind 10,000 safeguards, a single line appeared in the logs of a slain inquisitor. He remembered me. In time, the Ark found a world, unmarked, unclaimed, forgotten. Estrel named it Echelon, in memory of the last promise Lucaran had made, to remember and to let others begin again. There, the fragments of the past buried their weapons, not to forget, but to build anew. Cassian taught the young to fight, not as warriors of the Emperor's children, but as defenders of memory. Eidolon took to silence, crafting verses in an ancient tongue that spoke of loss and hope, and stars that sang. Kaltran carved circuits in stone, building shrines that hummed like heartbeats. And Estrel walked among them all, always watching the sky, waiting, not for Lucaran's return, but for the consequence of his choice. For somewhere out there, in the darkness between stars, something stirred. Not chaos, not salvation, not the Imperium, but a third path. One lit not by vengeance or law, but by the flame of memory. A flame Lucaran had carried across millennia and passed on without a word. On a far-off world, in a city long forgotten, a child knelt beside a mural carved into stone. It bore no name, but the child traced its outline. A warrior without a helm, holding up a broken mirror toward a sunless sky. "Who was he?" the child asked. The elder beside them smiled. "No one." "Then why do we remember him?" The elder's smile faded, replaced with something softer. "Because he remembered us." The galaxy spun on, indifferent to tragedy, blind to sacrifice. Stars were born in silence and died in fire. Empires rose screaming and crumbled in whispers. In the void between systems, among ruins too old to name, memory lingered, not in tomes or records, but in the hearts of those who had lost everything and chosen still to remember. On Echelon, the seasons passed. Ash became soil. Craters became gardens. A world that once knew nothing but wind and stone began to echo with laughter, with voices learning to sing again. They built without banners, no chapter markings, no aquila, no promise of eternity, only the quiet promise made to a forgotten god. We will not forget. Cassian stood alone atop the high cliffs. His hair, long grey now, was braided in the old ways. The sea below moved like dark glass, endless and cold. He looked up at the stars and tried to remember their names. There had once been a map, an imperial record of dominion. But here, none of those names held power. None of them mattered. All that remained were the unmarked constellations, the ones only Lucerin had seen. Cassian's mind drifted to the last battle, to the oracle's words. There is no prophecy. There is only memory. Had it all been for nothing? Number. That lie had died in the cathedral. Lucerin had died there too, or transformed, but no god had claimed him. No demon, no throne, only silence. And in that silence a choice. Not salvation, not damnation. Freedom. Estrel joined him, the wind catching her dark robes. She had aged little. Time no longer obeyed her. The light of the cathedral still burned behind her eyes. It's starting again, she said, voice quiet. Cassian nodded. The signals. More than that. She glanced skyward. A whisper in the warp, familiar. Faint Cassian exhaled. They've come looking. The Imperium. Perhaps even the remnants of the Third Legion, still clawing for legacy. Desperate to reclaim a past they had themselves destroyed. They would come not for peace but to bury, to erase, to silence what had survived. Cassian did not move. Do we run? No. That was not their way. Not anymore. She reached into her robes and drew forth a shard of glass, its edges blackened, its centre glowing with pale fire. The last fragment of the mirror, the last piece of the truth. She handed it to him, for when they asked what he stood for. Cassian took it, and for the first time in decades, he wept. They came in thunder, as they always did, grey ships, gold sigils, the seal of terror on their hulls. But when the dropcraft landed, there were no armies waiting for them, no rebels, no heretics in iron, only a single structure, a tall black spire carved with no name. Inside the walls were inscribed with lives, not battles, not victories, but memories. A poem written by a child who survived the cathedral. A soldier's letter, never sent. A prayer whispered to no god. A single name etched 1,000 times in 1,000 scripts. Lucerin. The Inquisitor who led the party was silent for a long time. They found no weapons, no threats, only a garden growing among the bones of an old war. And in the chapel beneath the spire they found a man, alone, armoured in silence, eyes clouded with time. Cassian said nothing. He handed them the shard. When they touched it, their minds flooded, not with doctrine, not with propaganda, but with memory. They saw what had been done in the name of purity, what had been broken in the name of order, what had been lost in the name of survival. The Inquisitor lowered his bolter. "What is this place?" he asked. Cassian's voice was hoarse, weathered. "A grave. For whom?" "For all of us." He died that night, quietly, no pain, no regret. In his hand they found the shard, still glowing, still whole, and as they buried him beneath the black spire, a star above Echelon blinked out. Another took its place. Time moved on. The Imperium, as always, absorbed, repressed, denied. The report was filed, no heresy detected. The system was marked unimportant, left alone, but some remembered. In forgotten corners of the galaxy, stories began to spread. Of a legion that had burned its name to save a single truth, of a Primarch's son who turned from glory to grace, of a broken mirror that showed not the future but the self. No temples were built, only gardens, only memories, and in the hearts of those who had heard the story, a single idea remained, that even in a galaxy of war, of gods and monsters, there could be a choice not to dominate, not to survive, but to remember, to carry the burden, to live, not for vengeance, but for what had been lost. And on nights when the sky was clear, some claimed they could see him, not Lucian as a god, not a ghost, but a man, walking alone among the stars, carrying the mirror still, looking not for salvation, only for those who still remembered, those who chose to remember. The Emperor's children had fallen, but not all of them had been lost. Some had become more than legion. They had become legacy, and in the silence between stars, they endured, still, ever, always, Finn.